Ah! Tiger.
Hey guys, I'm the Prickly Alpaca, and today I'm just working on the painting process for a client piece. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about my process for painting commissions like these, or just illustrations like these in general. And this one was pretty fun to work on. It was someone's Dungeons and Dragons character, and she has a pretty interesting, cool design. I don't get to work with a lot of characters that have sort of like a light pastel color palette, so it was a lot of fun actually. And the pose they gave me was also fantastic, really lively and like so much energy and motion in it. And I am not the greatest at poses like these, so it was good practice, especially drawing that outstretched foreshortened hand. We artists just love drawing those, don't we? So my painting process for pieces like these actually does begin with line art. Not everyone uses line art whenever they're doing a character painting or illustration, but I do tend to use line art just because I'm not quite as experienced at the lineless style. I can paint in it, it just takes me way longer, and I just have come to prefer using line art because it keeps all of your colors in place they're supposed to be during the flat color phase. And I make so many lighting decisions on the fly and sort of like weird stylistic decisions whenever I'm doing these pieces. So I like to have some organization. If I'm just left to my own devices, then it turns into a huge mess. And eventually, I know I'll probably learn how to paint in a lineless style without it taking me millions and millions of years. But until then, I'm going to stick with my line art. And here, I'm just finishing up my line art before I move on to the flat color phase. I thought this character's face and expression and like hair was really fun to work on. I don't get a lot of characters who have like this sort of short curly hairstyle, but it's actually one of my favorite hairstyles to draw. And I really like their facial features and like their horns. I like the flower in their hair. I just like drew a couple of rose petals falling off to the side with that because the character's name is Rose. And they also have like these little tiny wings. I like don't play Dungeons and Dragons. I want to, but my friend group is like dragging their heels with actually getting a campaign going, so I haven't had the opportunity yet. But I don't know, like I think this character is a tiefling. I'm not sure exactly what qualifies as a tiefling or not because I'm completely ignorant. Don't quote me on anything Dungeons and Dragons related. But I really like their horns and their tail and their little tiny dragon wings. I think it's super cute. So now I'm just moving on to the flat color process. And unlike a lot of people, when I flat color, I actually start to paint in the skin a little bit, just because I think it's easiest to sort of have some kind of tone to the skin besides just being one flat color that you're going to use to paint the skin later. I like to add some little blushies and warm colors to the skin in certain areas, like the hands and the shoulders and the face. It's sort of that like same blushy nose style that you see used on like Tumblr and stuff, but then like whenever I paint in the skin later, it starts to kind of make the skin look more alive and everything. So after flat colors, I start to add in just a layer of flat cell shading. It sort of helps me to decide what angle the lighting is going to be at. And in this one, I put it at like a dramatic top left angle. I think it sort of makes it look like she's practicing like drills in the late afternoon or something like that. It adds like a lot of drama to the piece. I thought it was a lot of fun to work on the shading and lighting at this angle, but it also gave me so many problems. I'm so used to using like really warm light and cool shadows and like sort of dropping in little bits of blue in the shadows, but since green was her accent color, blue just like didn't look right. So my stylistic thing didn't really fit this piece super well, and it actually sort of gave me some problems whenever I was trying to paint in like little details and like bounce lighting and stuff. Like obviously you can still do blue bounce lighting even if the character has green, but I like my characters to look a certain way and have this sort of unified quality once I finish the shading and painting process. So it didn't like come out exactly how I wanted. I couldn't use like my dramatic blue bounce lighting thing in this piece. I maybe put a little bit. I used like purple or something, I can't remember, but yeah, that was a struggle. And now I'm just sort of starting to paint in on like a layer above my cell shading. That's usually what I do. I'll have a flat color layer and then a cell shading layer. And then I'll go in and start painting in details above the cell shading layer but under the line art. And this just kind of allows me to still use the lines without messing them up, and it allows me to start putting in little details and brush strokes. I think it just looks really nice to have some kind of like painterly style, even with like the harder edges of cell shading. I definitely use a mix of like hard and soft edges in my cell shading because that's how lighting actually behaves, so I think it adds a little bit of realism. Here you can see me trying to put in a little bit of my blue bounce lighting, and it like doesn't exactly look right. I do end up changing it later to see if I can make the piece look more unified. It just, since the character has pink skin and like white hair and pink horns, there's like so much pink in this image, and the character's colors are a little bit more pastel. I feel like some of my stylistic things didn't match super well with the design of this character, but I think it does come together somewhat well by the end. So one thing that I will do whenever I'm painting a character like this is usually paint the face above the line art layer. I don't really like the whole animu nose thing. I like noses and faces to be like somewhat rendered out, and I like them to have dimension and form to them. So I'll actually try to sort of render out the nose and make it look like it has form and shape, and like the shadows are falling on it in a certain way. And it just looks better if it's sort of above the line art layer and the line art isn't like the biggest factor in how the forms of the face look. Here you can just see me like frantically trying to adjust all the different color balances in the image to make it look more unified, because I was struggling with that. But yeah, and you can definitely see whenever I flip my canvas that like my art is super wonky. Like I flipped the canvas so many times whenever I was drawing that face, and for some reason I just like can't see things right or something. I can't see whenever I'm making mistakes, especially on faces. And even whenever I'll flip it, it'll look fine like flipped, and then I'll flip it back, it'll look weird, and then I'll fix it on the view that I'm actually going to be using. And then it'll look weird whenever I flip it again. I just don't know. I think I'm getting a little bit better because I've started flipping my canvases so often whenever I draw, just to see if I can kick this habit, because I'm sick of having like a mad art lean. I'm really, really frustrated by my chronic art lean that seems to happen in every single piece I draw. I feel like some people just don't have art lean, or like it's the thing where if you're looking at your image for too long, you're making mistakes that you don't know you're making, and it kind of refreshes your view if you can flip the canvas, or, you know, flip your paper and stick it up to a light to see the other, like, mirrored version of it. I don't know. It's just a struggle for me. But here's the end product, and I think she came out pretty cute. So thank you all so much for watching and listening to me babble on about whatever I'm babbling on about this time. I promise there's going to be more complete content in the future, but I'm trying to finish up my college semester right now, so my hands are tied a little bit. But thank you for watching, and I'll be back next week with another video. And remember, whole wheat is the healthiest loaf.